Hi, welcome to Feed Your Soul. I am Melinda, and you are watching our series on the Torah portions. Our series is designed with followers of Jesus in mind to help all of us know our Bibles better than we do, to understand the front of the book, which is the foundation for the rest of it. We can't know that back part of our Bibles, that New Testament, without having a deep understanding of the foundation, right? The Torah, what many Christians call the Old Testament. I like to call the Hebrew scriptures because, orienting something, calling it old just because it's old according to us in our tradition doesn't seem super respectful. So the Hebraic scriptures have the keys, have the foundational information for us to understand who our Messiah is, his role, God's kingdom, and our place in that kingdom. So I'm glad you're here. If you're new to the channel, make sure you check out the other playlists. The one with the most content in the playlist is this Torah study. And we started way back in Genesis last fall. There's a few other videos that are popping up once we complete the first 5 books of the Bible here, which we're coming up on. There'll be lots more content coming up, all designed to help us know who we were created to be, our place in the kingdom of God. Okay, so this week we are getting into some meaty stuff in Deuteronomy. I mentioned a couple of times that Deuteronomy is my favorite book of the Bible. It's it really is. I mean, I probably have a few favorites, but there's so much here, and it's in this condensed format as Moses is kind of retelling these main points of what God wants to get across to his people to this next generation before they enter the land, the promised land, right? So we are in Ra'eh today, and that means see, maybe even look. Some of your translations might say behold. This title of the portion comes from the first significant word in that portion. And in our portion, it's right at the beginning, the first word: see, behold, look. Maybe all three is the best definition. Okay, so we are in Deuteronomy 11, starting at verse 26 through 16, 17. So it's long and there's a lot in it. And then we're looking at Isaiah 54, 11 through 55, 5, although we will look at the beginning of Isaiah 54. It was so hard to cut it off. I hate cutting off part of chapters for context, but then we're also going to look at Matthew, just a short piece of Matthew 5, 13 through 20. Okay, let's get started. Deuteronomy 11, 26. See, Ra'eh, today I am setting before you a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of Jehovah, your God, that I am giving you today, but a curse if you disobey the commandments of Jehovah, your God, and turn aside from the path I command you today by following other gods, which you have not known. When Jehovah your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, you are to proclaim the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. Are not these mountains across the Jordan west of the road towards the sunset in the land of the Canaanites who live in Arabah opposite Gilgal near the oak of Moreh? For you are about to cross the Jordan to enter and possess the land that Jehovah your God is giving you. When you take possession of it and settle in it, be careful to follow all the statutes and ordinances that I am setting before you today. And that's really a huge theme that we're going to see all through this portion is you are to be careful to follow all of these instructions, all of these statutes and ordinances and commandments that I lay before you today. If not, it's not going to go well. What I want to pause here before we get into the next chapter is I want to pause here and talk about this idea of this blessing and this curse. And I want you to see how there's only 2 options. And the 2 options are you have a blessing if you obey the commandments of Jehovah, your Elohim. That's the personal name for God and your God, right? So it's his name. If you obey the commandments of Jehovah, your Elohim, your God. that I am giving you today, but a curse if you disobey the commandments of Jehovah, your Elohim, and turn aside from the path I commanded you today by following other gods. So there's only two choices, and I just find this so interesting. It's you follow Jehovah by obeying the commandments, and you get blessing, but you're not following Jehovah and you are going after other gods if you disobey the commandments. As Christians, we need to really understand this concept that shows up over and over again in the front of our Bibles. What does it mean? What were God's people told over and over and over again in the Torah and the instructions straight from God? They were given the definition of what it means to follow God. They were given, we, God's people, were given the directive, instructions, the blueprint, if you will, on what it means to follow God. There's two choices. You follow his commandments and have a blessing and be one of his, or you don't follow his commandments and you turn aside from him and you follow other gods. Like they go together. And it's a huge concept that I think some of us in Christianity have really divorced ourselves from. So keep this in mind, see this theme as we go through this whole portion. Okay, Deuteronomy 12. These are the statutes and ordinances you must be careful to follow all the days you live in the land that Jehovah, the God of your fathers, has given you to possess. Destroy completely all the places where the nations you are dispossessing have served their gods, atop the high mountains, on the hills, under every green tree. Tear down their altars, smash their sacred pillars, burn up their Asherah poles, cut down the idols of their gods, and wipe out their names from every place. You shall not worship Jehovah your God in this way. Instead, you must seek the place Jehovah your God will bring from among all your tribes to establish as a dwelling place for his name. There you must go. To that place, you are to bring your burnt offerings and sacrifices, your tithes and your heave offerings, your vow offerings, your free will offerings, as well as the firstborn of your herds and flocks. There, in the presence of Jehovah your God, you and your households shall eat and rejoice in all you do, because Jehovah your God has blessed you. You are not to do as we are doing here today, where everyone does what seems right in his own eyes, for you have not yet come to the resting place and the inheritance that Jehovah your God is giving you. When you cross the Jordan and live in the land that Jehovah your God is giving you as an inheritance, and he gives you rest from all the enemies around you, and you dwell securely, then Jehovah your God will choose a dwelling for his name. And there you are to bring everything I command you, your burnt offerings and sacrifices, your tithes and special gifts, and all the choice offerings you vow to Jehovah. And you shall rejoice before Jehovah your God, you, your sons and daughters, your men servants and maid servants, and the Levite within your gates, since he has no portion or inheritance among you. Be careful not to offer your burnt offerings in just any place you see. You must offer them only in the place Jehovah will choose in one of your tribal territories, and there you shall do all that I command you. But whenever you want, you may slaughter and eat meat within your gates, according to the blessing Jehovah your God has given you. Both clean and unclean may eat it. Meaning if you are clean or unclean, right? Because to go and offer at the tabernacle, you have to be ceremonially clean. But here, either clean or unclean may eat of it as they would a gazelle or a deer. But you must not eat the blood. Pour it on the ground like water. Within your gates, you must not eat the tithe of your grain or new wine or oil, the firstborn of your herds or flocks, or any of the offerings you have vowed to give, or your free will offerings or special gifts. Instead, you must eat them in the presence of Jehovah your God, at the place Jehovah your God will choose, you, your sons and daughters, your men servants and maid servants, and the Levite within your gates. Rejoice before Jehovah your God in all you do, and be careful not to neglect the Levites as long as you live in your land. When Jehovah your God expands your territory as he has promised, and you crave meat, and you say, I want meat to eat, and you eat it wherever you want, if the place where Jehovah your God chooses to put his name is far from you, then you may slaughter any of your herd or flock he has given you, as I have commanded, and you may eat it within your gates whenever you want. Indeed, you may eat it as you would eat a gazelle or a deer. Both the ceremonially unclean and the clean may eat it. Be sure not to eat the blood. So he's reiterating this. We just heard this, right? It's so important, this idea about not consuming blood. You must not eat the blood. Pour it on the ground like water. Do not eat it, so that it may go well with you and your children after you, because you will be doing what is right in the eyes of Jehovah. But you are to take the holy things, your vow offering, and go to the place Jehovah will choose. Present the meat and the blood of your burnt offerings on the altar of Jehovah your God. The blood of your other sacrifices must be poured out beside the altar of Jehovah your God, but you may eat the meat. Be careful to obey all these things I commanded you, so that it may go well with you and your children after you, because you will be doing what is good and right in the eyes of Jehovah your God. When Jehovah your God cuts off before you the nations you are entering to dispossess, and you drive them out and live in their land, be careful not to be ensnared by their ways after they have been destroyed before you. Do not inquire about their gods, asking, how do these nations serve their gods? I will do likewise. You must not worship Jehovah your God in this way, because they practiced for their gods every abomination which Jehovah hates. They even burned their sons and daughters in the fire as sacrifices to their gods. See that you do everything I command you. Do not add to it or subtract from it. So it's a big chapter. I probably say that after every chapter in Deuteronomy, because there's just so much in each chapter. A lot of this chapter talked about where to eat meat. Right up until now, since Israel has come out of Egypt, every one of their meals of meat involved a sacrifice in the tabernacle. I mean, even their farewell meal on Passover night involved a sacrifice, really, of this Passover lamb. The blood was put over the door, and they ate it, but it was this ritualistic direction given from Jehovah. Now it's going to be different. Being in the land, and eventually they're going to multiply, and everyone is not going to live close enough to where God will place his name, which he's kind of keeping that a mystery right now. In the place that he will place his name, that will be the central location where sacrifices are to come. But if you're far away, or even if you're not, every time you eat meat, that doesn't have to involve a sacrifice. But when you are bringing your sacrifice, you are to do it in the place where God will place his name, not in your backyard. So there's a really interesting connection between this part of Deuteronomy and the binding of Isaac, the Akedah. There's this story of the binding of Isaac, which we don't call it the sacrifice of Isaac because he wasn't sacrificed. He was bound and put on an altar. And this was directed by Jehovah, and Abraham was told to take his son to this mountain that he would name as they were on their way, right? So it's the same language, a place where God will choose, right? I have the actual quote, Genesis 22, on the mountain I will show you, right? So it's really similar language there. And it is actually the same place. We find out later on that this is the place where God chooses to put his name. We find out in Second Chronicles, we're told where Solomon is actually building the temple. It's on Mount Moriah. It's this same place. So we have these like mirroring conversations that are going on. God is sending Abraham to this place that he will tell him the name of the mountain on the way. Abraham names the place. He names it Jehovah Jireh, the place where God will provide, right? This is where we get Jehovah Jireh is kind of the classic Christian way to say that name, but Jehovah Jireh, Yireh. is God will provide. And that's what this mountain is named until it's named Mount Moriah a little bit later on. Same place, the place where the temple dwells, the place where God met Abraham and told him not to harm his son, and then provided that ram. And we see, if you've been watching, when we look at the source in Jubilees. Jubilees is an extra biblical book, so interesting. I'm not going to go all into it now, but we see in Jubilees that there's this insight about the connection between Passover and this binding of Isaac. So you have this provision of this lamb, of this freedom from oppression, freedom from slavery, a path to walk into a new relationship with God. There's a connection between these two events, and it's really explicit in the book of Jubilees. This whole event takes place at this time. So we have this place that God will choose to place his name, which becomes the temple where God's presence dwells among his people, where people come and bring their sacrifices to Jehovah. This is the traditional site actually of creation in Judaism. So lots of things going on here at this specific site. So we're seeing these connections between these two things, and there's more. So more of a connection is what God was actually asking Abraham to do. God was asking Abraham to sacrifice his son. We know that this is a test. Abraham knows that this was a test. Jubilees gives us some insight on that as well, that it was actually a test for Satan, Hasatan. Mastema, I think, is actually what his name is in the book of Jubilees. And it was to show Satan the kind of faith that Abraham had. But I also think it was to edify, to show Abraham, remind Abraham, like, you can trust me. You feel like this is wrong? It is. Trust me. Even if you think I'm wrong, trust me. I will work it out for you in the end. To build this relationship that he has with Abraham. Remember, this isn't the first interaction Abraham has with God. There has been reason for Abraham to trust the goodness of God up until now. And I think the connections between these two chapters are purposeful to connect this part of Deuteronomy here. Do not go after other gods, inquiring how did these nations serve their gods, will do likewise. You must not serve your God in this way. And God reiterates here, they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire as sacrifices to their gods. So some of this language should be stirring up, if not for those in person there hearing this from Moses, this next generation. It should absolutely for us, because we have the hindsight of knowing where God is going to place his name to connect these two stories. Mount Moriah was the place where Isaac was bound, and that ram was provided, and it is the place where people are to bring their sacrifices. And so the reiteration is there. Yes, this was a test I gave Abraham, but under no circumstances is this what I want for my people. He does not accept these things, and he needs to remind his people as they are going into a land where this practice is practiced. They even burn their sons and daughters in the fire as sacrifices to their gods. Moses is reiterating, do not follow them. They will draw you into abominable practices, and you need to not go. Do not follow them. You will be sucked in. And I just find these two connections really neat. And there's more connections linguistically in these two chapters. We don't have so much time to get into that, but yeah, really cool. Okay. Deuteronomy 13. Again, one of my favorite chapters. Okay. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams arises among you and proclaims a sign or wonder to you, and if the sign or wonder he has spoken to you comes about, but he says, let us follow other gods, which you have not known, and let us worship them, you must not listen to the words of that prophet or dreamer of dream. For Jehovah, your God, is testing you to find out whether you love him with all your heart and with all your soul. You are to follow Jehovah your God and fear him and keep his commandments and listen to his voice, serve him and hold fast to him. Such a prophet or a dreamer must be put to death because he has advocated rebellion against Jehovah your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of slavery. He has tried to turn you from the way in which Jehovah your God has commanded you to walk. So you must purge the evil from among you. If your very own brother, or your son or daughter, or the wife you embrace, or your closest friend secretly entices you, saying, "Let us go worship other gods," which neither you nor your fathers have known, the gods of the peoples around you, whether near or far, whether from one end of the earth to the other, you must not yield to him or listen to him. Show him no pity and do not spare him or shield him. Instead, you must surely kill him. Your hand must be the first against him to put him to death. And then all the hands of the people stone him to death for trying to turn you away from Jehovah your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Then all Israel will hear and be afraid and never again do such a wicked thing among you. If, regarding one of the cities that Jehovah your God is giving you to inhabit, you hear it said that wicked men have arisen from among you and led the people of their city astray, saying, "Let us go serve other gods," which you have not known, then you must inquire, investigate, and interrogate thoroughly. And if it is established with certainty that this abomination has been committed among you, then you must surely put the inhabitants of the city to the sword, devote to destruction all its people and livestock. And you are to gather its plunder in the middle of the public square and completely burn the city and all its plunder as a whole burnt offering to Jehovah your God. The city must remain a mound of ruins forever, never to be rebuilt. Nothing devoted to destruction shall cling to your hands, so that Jehovah will turn from his fierce anger, grant you mercy, show you compassion, and multiply you as he swore to your fathers. Because you obeyed Jehovah your God, keeping all his commandments I am giving you today, and doing what is right in the eyes of Jehovah. I want you to think on that chapter for a moment. If this chapter in Deuteronomy is new to you, I want you to think about it. If a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, someone who can show you signs and wonders, so someone who can perform miracles, if that person comes to you and says, "Let us follow other gods," which we have talked about, there was two choices in the beginning, right? You can either follow Jehovah's commandments or you cannot and follow other gods. There's only two choices, which you have not known. So Jehovah is making this personal. You know me, you know my character. If someone, even someone who can do miracles, tells you, persuades you to come worship in another way, to not follow the commandments, right? You must not listen to that person. For Jehovah is testing you to find out whether you love him with all of your heart and soul. What you are to do is follow Jehovah and fear him, keep his commandments and listen to his voice. Hold fast to him, the God you know. This prophet or this person who is doing these signs and wonders, he must be put to death because he advocated for rebellion against Jehovah, against his commandments, against his ways, right? He has tried to turn you from the way in which Jehovah, your God, has commanded you to walk. You must purge this evil among you. He must be put to death. Now, I want you to just think for a moment on the Jesus that has been preached in many churches. Has Christianity not taught, either explicitly or implicitly, that the commandments are done away with and we don't need to worry about them anymore? Or that they're there for our edification, but we couldn't possibly keep all the commandments, so Yeshua keeps them for us, Jesus keeps them for us? I've actually been told that if I try to keep some of the commandments and I don't do them all, then I'm damning myself to hell. I've actually been told that by a pastor, in fact. Um, in light of this chapter, Jesus, Yeshua, our Messiah, would fail this test. We call this the Deuteronomy 13 test. Any prophet, dreamer of dreams, anyone claiming to be the Messiah would need to pass this test. Or is that person pulling people away from the commandments of God, telling them they no longer apply, saying the Sabbath has changed to another day, or, oh, all food is clean, all animals are clean? If someone is doing that, they failed this test. And I've kind of been, when we started out these Torah portions and these teachings, I've been gentle about the following the commandments. I've reiterated it. I've shown throughout how God is asking us to follow his ways and give ear to his instruction, and they're for our good. But at this point in the book of Deuteronomy, if you've made it this far through the series, it's time to be real with ourselves. Have we been following a Jesus that would fail this test here? I think many mainstream Christian denominations do promote a Jesus who would fail this test. Knowing that Yeshua, Jesus, Yeshua in Hebrew, knowing that he is supposed to be coming to a people, to the house of Israel, right? He said he has only come to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, coming to the people who know this well. Would he come and fail this test? How could God put this in front of them? How could Moses speak these words and say, hey, here's how you test the prophets who are going to come? Because they are going to come and they are going to claim to come in my name. But here's how you know if they come in my name. Would he send Jesus to do the opposite? It doesn't make sense. It's not logical. So it's important. It's important that we understand the front of the book. Are we Christians promoting a Jesus that is more in our image than his? Are we promoting a Messiah that would not hold up to these verses in Deuteronomy? I think we need to check ourselves. No wonder the Jews don't believe Jesus is the Messiah. We've created him to be something, I don't know, Roman or English or American, but he doesn't seem very Hebrew. And these are the scriptures. This is the foundation that prophesied his coming. We can't have a Messiah who goes against this. So if our Jesus is telling us that we don't have to keep the commandments of God, we might want to check our interpretation of his words and filter them through this knowledge of the foundations of the idea of the Messiah. I think it's really important. All right, Deuteronomy 14. You are children of Jehovah your God. Do not cut yourselves or shave your foreheads on behalf of the dead, for you are a holy people to Jehovah your God. Jehovah has chosen you to be a prized possession out of the peoples on all the face of the earth. You must not eat any abomination. These are the animals that you may eat. So we're just continuing to get examples of how the people of God are to not be like the nations around them. So don't cut yourselves on behalf of the dead. The verse in Leviticus also talked about do not tattoo or mark your skin on behalf of the dead. And now you must not eat. Remember, a reminder about what you must not eat. Even if the nations are eating these things, you can't eat any of these. And they're called an abomination. Some of your versions might say detestable thing, but it's the same word used as abomination in the last chapter. So these are the animals you may eat: the ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roe deer, the wild goat, the ibex, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. You may eat any animal that has a split hoof, divided in two, that chews the cud. But of those that chew the cud or have a completely divided hoof, you are not to eat the following: the camel, the rabbit, or the rock badger. Although they chew the cud, they do not have a divided hoof. They are unclean for you, as well as the pig. Though it has a divided hoof, it does not chew the cud. It is unclean for you. You must not eat it, its meat, or touch its carcass. Of all the creatures that live in the water, you may eat anything with fins and scales, but you may not eat anything that does not have fins and scales. It is unclean for you. You may eat any clean bird, but these you may not eat: the eagle, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the red kite, the falcon, or any kind of kite, any kind of raven, the ostrich, the screech owl, the gull, any kind of hawk, the little owl, the great owl, the white owl, the desert owl, the osprey, the cormorant, the stork, or any kind of heron, the hoopoe or the bat. And just for birds, because the list seems strange and we don't know, we kind of give their estimates in language, like what exactly birds they would connect to in our modern labeling of these animals. But it's really predator birds. If you can see, like, we're not to eat birds of prey. All flying insects are clean for you. They may not be eaten, but you may eat any clean bird. So not a bat, no insects that fly, but that you may eat the clean birds. You are not to eat any carcass. You may give it to the foreigner residing in your gates, and he may eat it, or you may sell it to a foreigner. For you are a holy people belonging to Jehovah your God. You must not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. So we've talked about this before, about the animals that are considered food and the ones that Jehovah says, no, they're not considered food. And it's pretty clear. They're called out by name. Again, some of the translations are not exact and we don't know, and people make their best guesses, but we have the directions, at least with birds. Not with birds, we don't have directions. That's just the list. But with mammals and with fish, we're given criteria. And for the mammals, they have to have a split hoof and chew the cud. They have to have a split hoof and chew the cud. They have to do both of those things. So like a pig has a split hoof but doesn't chew the cud. And a rabbit chews and chews and chews, but has paws and not a hoof. So there's criteria on what God created as food. Other animals were created to be food for animals. Other animals were created to eat dead and dying decaying matter. Other animals were created for other purposes, but certain animals, the ones God notes here, are the ones created for food. And we went over that back in Leviticus. So check out that portion. I don't remember the name of that portion. Shemini, maybe? It might be in Shemini. Someone check that out. So the laws, what we can eat, what we can't eat. This chapter pulls up something a little bit different. I can't remember if the passages in Leviticus touch on it or not. But that end piece where there's a carcass, so something has died, that could be given to the foreigner who resides among you. So someone who lives with you but isn't quite one of you yet, right? Visitors. And it bothered me a lot. It bothered me a lot that this command seems to kind of go against the idea that God said, this is food and this isn't food, and here's the delineation. So why can some people eat a carcass that we don't know really how it got there, but some people can't? And then I heard it preached this way, and it just clicked for me. The altar is the table we share with Jehovah. We eat what is fit for his table. But if one of those clean animals, and that's what this verse here is referring to, if one of those clean animals dies and it does not seem to be diseased or the meat seems okay, God doesn't want his animals to go to waste. So feed it to someone who's not bringing it to the temple. Feed it to a foreigner. Feed it to someone among you, someone who's hungry. It's fine to feed them. But you know what? This isn't going on my altar. So it's actually not fit for us to kind of share as our meal together. And that just like touched a place in my heart. It made so much of these sacrificial laws make sense. And that the food we eat is this food that we share in communion with Jehovah. And that's why they're the same, right? These clean animals are the ones that we can eat, and they're the ones that go on the altar. And that kind of gray area of where it was a clean animal, but it died in a way that we're not exactly sure how it died, but we don't want to waste. And we don't want people to be going hungry while perfectly good food goes to waste. So let's feed the hungry with this carcass, right? This animal that died. Um, but it's really not fit for Jehovah's table in the tabernacle or in the temple, because there's a really specific way on how you slaughter the animal and you drain the blood. Um, I think that that is a loving and interesting way to really look at these commandments. It's his table, and the animals that go on his table are those animals that are fit for us to eat as well. Okay, moving on. Deuteronomy 14:22. You must be sure to set aside a tenth of all the produce you brought forth each year from your fields. You are to eat a tenth of your grain, new wine and oil, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks in the presence of Jehovah your God at the place he will choose as a dwelling for his name, so that you may learn to fear Jehovah your God always. But if the distance is too great for you to carry that with which Jehovah your God has blessed you, because the place where Jehovah your God will choose to put his name is too far away, then exchange it for money. Take the money in your hand and go to the place Jehovah your God will choose. Then you may spend the money on anything you desire: cattle, sheep, wine, strong drink, or anything you wish. You are to feast there in the presence of Jehovah your God and rejoice with your household. And do not neglect the Levite within your gate, since he has no portion or inheritance among you. At the end of every 3 years, bring a tenth of all your produce for that year and lay it up within your gates. Then the Levite, because he has no portion or inheritance among you, the foreigner, the fatherless, the widow within your gates may come and eat and be satisfied. And Jehovah your God will bless you in all the work of your hands. Okay, just stopping after I had split the last chapter in half because I wanted to just mention something quickly here. Turn your tithe into money, right? Because tithe isn't actually money, it's crops or it's part of your flock. So take the crops or the part of your flock and turn it into money if you live too far away from the land, so that you can purchase what you need for celebrating with Jehovah, for having a meal, a feast with Jehovah. Interestingly, two of these things in this list of suggestions of things that you can buy, the cattle, it's strong drink and wine. My day job, I am a nurse and I do holistic nutrition, like real deal nutrition. And I'll tell you right now, alcohol is poison. Some bodies can handle it better than others. I am not I am not advocating that people drink, especially never in excess. The Bible condemns drunkenness. But this passage really explicitly shows us that having wine with a Shabbat meal or a feast day or some kind of celebration, it's not a sin. So I am very, very sensitive to hearing Christians, people who proclaim faith in Jehovah, in the Father, and in Jesus. When I hear them adding to the word, that also comes up in this portion. Do not add, do not take away, do not decide what is a sin if it's not already listed in the word. And drinking alcohol every now and again as part of a celebration is not a sin. So we're not going to treat it as if it's such. We cannot add to the word, period. Might not always be healthy, and drunkenness is clearly not okay, but it's not a sin. We can't add. Also in the small section is just a reminder of the provision that God has for the Levites, the widows, the fatherless, and the foreigners. Remember, the foreigners would, like in context here, would be people who don't own land. Or at least not yet, right? Once they kind of attach themselves to Israel, they can get an inheritance in whatever tribe they settle in. But if they are foreigners who are needing care, they likely don't have land yet, so they can't grow their crops. So they need some help. They need some provision. And this is a reminder that we're here to care for those who need care. Okay, Deuteronomy 15. At the end of every 7 years, you must cancel debts. This is the manner of remission. Every creditor shall cancel what he loaned to his neighbor. He is not to collect anything from his neighbor or brother, because Jehovah's time of release has been proclaimed. You may collect something from a foreigner, but you must forgive whatever your brother owes you. There will be no poor among you. However, because Jehovah will surely bless you in the land that Jehovah your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance. If you only obey Jehovah your God and be careful to follow his commandments I'm giving you today, there will be no poor if you do it this way, if you do it my way. When Jehovah your God blesses you as he has promised, you will lend to many nations, but borrow from none. You will rule over many nations, but be ruled by none. If there is a poor man among your brothers within any of the gates in the land that Jehovah your God is giving you, then you are not to harden your heart or shut your hand from your brother, from your poor brother. Instead, you are to open your hand to him and freely loan him whatever he needs. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought in your heart. The 7th year, the year of release, is near, so that you look upon your poor brother begrudgingly and give him nothing. He will cry out to Jehovah against you, and you will be guilty of sin. Give generously to him, and do not let your heart be grieved when you do so. And because of this, Jehovah your God will bless you in all your work and in everything to which you put your hand. For there will never cease to be poor in the land. That is why I'm commanding you to open wide your hand to your brother and to the poor and the needy in your land, which is just interesting, right? Because God said, if you do everything I say, there will be no poor. We really have some foreshadowing here. There will always be poor in your land, so you must be generous. If you would do these things the way I set them up for you, there will be no poor, but there will always be poor in your land, so be generous. If a fellow Hebrew, a man or a woman, is sold to you and serves you 6 years, then in the 7th year you must set him free. And when you release him, do not send him away empty-handed. You are to furnish him liberally from your flock, your threshing floor, your winepress. You shall give to him as Jehovah your God has blessed you. Remember that when you were slaves in the land of Egypt, Jehovah your God redeemed you. And that is why I'm giving you this command today. But if your servant says to you, I do not want to leave you because he loves you and your household is well off with you, then take an awl and pierce it through his ear into the door, and he will become your servant for life. And treat your maidservant the same way. Do not regard it as a hardship to set your servant free, because his 6 years of service were worth twice the wages of a hired hand. And Jehovah your God will bless you in all you do. You must set apart to Jehovah your God every firstborn male produced by your herds and flocks. You are not to put the firstborn of your oxen to work, nor are you to shear the firstborn of your flock. Each year, you and your household are to eat it before Jehovah your God in the place Jehovah will choose. But if an animal has a defect, is lame or blind, or has any serious flaws, you must not sacrifice it to Jehovah your God. Eat it within your gates. The unclean and the clean may eat it, as they would a gazelle or a deer. But you must not eat the blood. Pour it on the ground like water. The things that are reiterated throughout, I always they stick out to me, but they must have been an issue or they wouldn't have been repeated so many times. Don't eat the blood. A reminder, don't eat the blood, right? Also, the whole boiling a kid in the mother's milk, that was repeated 3 times in the Torah. And so it was a practice of those around them. And so it's a reiteration because it was something that was happening. So another section, another chapter with laws of really love. It is, this is the heart of Jehovah, to take care of others, to take care of the poor, for us to be generous, for us to love our neighbors as ourselves, right? It's just what the whole law and the prophets all hang on. These two commandments: love Jehovah your God with all your heart, mind, and soul and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. From the Sabbath year, right, to where debts are canceled, to where servants go free. And this is like an indentured servanthood, right, where people need work, can't take care of themselves, or their family can't take care of them. So they're sent into another household to work, but only for this time period. They will go free in that Jovel year. The Shemitah year, actually, Jubilee is that 49th into 50th year. This is the Shemitah year, that 7th year, where freedom is proclaimed. A reminder, it's a Sabbath year, right? And so this is just a reminder of how important God's, he sets up this template, these patterns, right? And we have the 7th day of rest to remind us who is God, to remind us that we were released from slavery, that he is our provider, right? So that 7th day is a reminder there. And then that 7th year is again to celebrate and honor. We are going to release others from their debts. We are going to release others from their commitments so they don't have to serve us, to honor Jehovah our God, to proclaim our own freedom and that others deserve that same freedom. And then we have the Jubilee, which is that 7 times 7. It's a huge year of release and celebration. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful pattern that happens over and over and over again. What happens in the Jubilee year is the land actually goes back. So if you've leased land, or you got into some bad times where you lost your family's inheritance of land, you actually get it back. And so there's all of this provision to take care of the people because of our provider, right? To kind of go back to that reference that Abraham named Mount Moriah, Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Yireh. He's our provider. We just need to honor what he says, follow his instructions. All right, 16, finally. Observe the month of Aviv and celebrate the Passover to Jehovah your God, because in the month of Aviv, Jehovah your God brought you out of Egypt by night. You are to offer to Jehovah your God the Passover sacrifice from the herd or flock in the place Jehovah will choose as a dwelling for his name. You must not eat leavened bread with it for 7 days. You are to eat it with unleavened bread, the bread of affliction, because you left the land of Egypt in haste, so that you may remember for the rest of your life the day that you left the land of Egypt. No leaven is to be found in all of your land for 7 days, and none of the meat you sacrifice in the evening of the first day shall remain until the morning. You are not to sacrifice the Passover animal in any of the towns that Jehovah your God is giving you. You must only offer it, the sacrifice, in the place Jehovah your God will choose as a dwelling for his name. Do this in the evening as the sun sets, at the same time you departed from Egypt. And you shall roast it and eat it in the place Jehovah your God will choose. And in the morning you shall return to your tents. For 6 days you must eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day you shall hold a solemn assembly to Jehovah your God. You must not do any work. You are to count off 7 weeks from the time you first put the sickle into the standing grain, and you shall celebrate the Feast of Weeks to Jehovah your God with a free will offering that you give in proportion to how Jehovah your God has blessed you. And you shall rejoice before Jehovah your God in the place he will choose as a dwelling for his name. You, your sons, your daughters, your men servants and maid servants, and the Levite within your gate, as well as the foreigner and the fatherless and the widows among you. Everyone is to go. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt and carefully follow these statutes. You are to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days after you have gathered the produce of your threshing floor and your winepress. You shall rejoice in your feast, you and your sons and daughters and men servants and maid servants and the Levite and the foreigner and the fatherless and the widow, your whole household, your whole town. For 7 days you shall celebrate a feast to Jehovah your God in the place he will choose, because Jehovah your God will bless you in all your produce and in all the work of your hands, so that your joy will be complete. 3 times a year all your men are to appear before Jehovah your God in the place he will choose, at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. No one should appear before Jehovah empty-handed. Everyone must appear with a gift as he is able, according to the blessing that Jehovah your God has given you. So we have these 3 holidays. We've gone over the holidays in previous sections. These ones are specifically come in this place because they're the ones that are all about the place and the name that Jehovah will choose. There's 3 traveling holidays, and it is Passover, which is really the week of unleavened bread. Shavuot, which is that Feast of Weeks that we count after, we begin counting after the Sabbath after Passover. And then Sukkot, which is that 7, maybe 8-day celebration where people live in the sukkahs, the booths. And the whole family is to go up to the place in which God will place his name. The men are to appear before Jehovah with the sacrifice, but everyone is to go so that they can all celebrate in the area. And sometimes that feels tough, right, for us as women. Like, why is it the men that are the ones that are going to the tabernacle? But I got some insight this year doing these portions, and I just think it honestly, I mean, we're not going to get into a debate on the role of men and women, but just a very practical issue of menstrual cycles, blood, right? So you have to be in a certain state of cleanliness to be able to go up to the temple, and women might be recovering from childbirth or menstruating, right? There are natural states in which women are that actually are to keep us away from the place in which God will place his name. And we've talked about why this is, and I have a whole theory on it having to do with death and death-like things, and there is cellular death involved as we shed the linings of our uterus, or even in the afterbirth, after we give birth. Some ideas I have on that, but it's not punitive, and it actually takes a little bit of that burden off of us. We can stay and be the mothers we need to be, and the men can take these things to the place in which God will place his name. But over and over again, we're told everyone's to go. Your whole household, the men servants, the maid servants, the widows, the orphans, the Levites, everyone is to come celebrate. And it's just this beautiful community celebration unto Jehovah, to just remind us that we are his. And so it's such a big portion, and it's probably a long one. I'm not sure exactly how long we've been recording, but as we get into our prophet pairing, again, we're doing some of these comfort chapters from the book of Isaiah. And as I was preparing this section, I'm realizing there's so much here. We left off in the comfort sections of Isaiah last time at the beginning of Isaiah 51. And as I was kind of paging through to this week's in it's 54, I'm like, oh, we missed so much goodness in this chapter. The idea just after in Isaiah 51, just after where we left off last week, I have the Bible here in front of me, just to go with our kind of theme this week, in 51 verse 7, listen to me, you who know righteousness, the people in whose heart is my law. Fear not the reproach of man, nor be dismayed at their revilings. For the moth will eat them up like a garment, and the worm will eat them like wool. But my righteousness will be forever, and my salvation to all generations. So those who serve me with their heart, right? Whose heart is my law, right? Who have a heart for my law. This is not language that is New Testament language. Like we serve the Lord with our heart in the New Testament era, but in the Old Testament, it was all about works. It's both, right? And here Isaiah kind of reiterates this law and heart connection that we see in Jeremiah. Following the commandments is what equals righteousness. But it's not this rote doing a checklist of things. It's about the heart, right? It's about loving the ways of the Father, not as a checkoff list, but as a way to acknowledge He is our creator and He knows what is good for us. And we see the fruit. We see the fruit of His commandments, and they are good. Get me started on that, like the West and just Judeo-Christian principles transformed the whole world. And so we see the ways of Jehovah are good and their fruit is good. People can abuse that and that fruit can be bad, but that doesn't come from Jehovah's ways. It's from people who abuse them. And just to tie all of this together, these sections are to be about comfort. But I just wanted to kind of put in this missing context because when we jump into Isaiah, where the portion starts at verse 11, there's this beautiful context that happens before, right? So we go through 51 talking about the law and the heart and His righteousness and how it will last for generations, all generations. And then we get into this coming of His salvation, right? That starts in Isaiah 52, and we see it in Isaiah 53 and 54, which are beautiful chapters that are pretty famous, right? Isaiah 53 is a very messianic chapter. Us Christians know it well, as we see a lot of the prophetic connections made to Jesus. So this is the context as 54 picks up is you, the righteous ones, are following my laws in your heart because you love me and you love my ways, and you will be blessed. But those of you who don't, there is going to be a harsh punishment coming. But do not fear, take comfort. My salvation is coming. And so that's where we kind of pick up in 54. So I'm not going to read through these verses that actually aren't in the portion, but I mean, pause, read through them now if you have time. They're just beautiful and it adds context. And I just wanted to remind people the context coming in to where we were picking up in verse 11. Oh, afflicted city, lashed by storms without solace, surely I will set your stones in antimony, and I will lay your foundations with sapphires. I will make your pinnacles of rubies, your gates sparkling, your jewels, and all your walls of precious stones. Then all your sons will be taught by Jehovah, and great will be their prosperity. Right? So there was this reminder about righteousness, this promise of salvation, this reminder that you have been like left and you feel abandoned and you are humiliated. But I am going to come back and I'm going to rebuild to make you glorious again in the sight of the nations. In righteousness, you will be established far from oppression, for you will have no fear. Terror will be far removed, for it will not come near you. If anyone attacks you, it is not from me. Whoever assails you will fall before you. Behold, I have created the craftsman who fans the coals into flames and forges a weapon fit for its task. And I have created the destroyer to wreak havoc. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and you will refute every tongue that will accuse you. This is the heritage of the servants of Jehovah, and their vindication is from me, declares Jehovah. And then Isaiah 55 is just a beautiful chapter. Don't stop at verse 5. Read the rest of it. It's just gorgeous. Come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you without money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on that which is not bread, and your labor on that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good, and your soul will delight in the richest of foods. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen so that your soul may live. I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my loving devotion promised to David. Behold, I have made him a witness to the nations, a leader and commander of the peoples. Surely I will summon a nation you do not know, and nations who do not know you will run to you. For Jehovah your God, the Holy One of Israel, has bestowed glory on you. So there's just this beautiful gospel story nestled into the book of Isaiah of turning away from his ways. The consequence that comes along with that as we distance ourselves spiritually from our Father, it actually distances us physically from our Father, right? We are far apart both spiritually and physically from him when we are not walking in his ways. But Isaiah tells the story of a comforter of salvation that will come and make all this right. And then those beautiful prophetic messages of what the kingdom come will look like and how there will be no more need, and the nations will flock, and his people will be a light. And it's just beautiful. And I love it. And I could just keep talking about Isaiah, but I'm going to move on to our New Testament portion, which is in Matthew 5. And we can just let Yeshua speak a little bit more into what he has to say about the commandments of Jehovah. Matthew 5:13. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its savor, or some say flavor, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are a light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Instead, they set it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Do not think, remember, this is Yeshua talking, Jesus, do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but fulfill them. For I tell you truly, until heaven and earth pass away, not a single jot or a stroke of the pen will disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. So then, whoever breaks one of these, the least of these commandments, and teaches others to do likewise, will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So, when read in context of this portion in Deuteronomy, talking about what this dreamer of dreams, what this prophet, if this prophet comes and speaks words that draw you away from the commandments, that draw you into serving other gods, remember there's two choices: obey the commandments or serve other gods. There's nothing in between, right? I lay before you a blessing and a curse. There were two choices. If the people have been warned that if a prophet comes and pulls you away from the commandments, they are disqualified and actually should be put to death. Having that context here as you read Yeshua's words of that he did not come to abolish any law. And he actually said, if you are teaching people to not follow the commandments, even the least of these commandments, you will be least in the kingdom of heaven. It really is clear. The commandments are for our good. They are applicable to us today. Any of the ones that we can keep. That's really all it is. We can't keep ones that apply to the place where Jehovah will put his name, the temple. That doesn't exist right now. If you are not a Levitical priest, you can't keep any of those laws, right? We don't have a priest system, so we can't really take our tithes to that. Our tithes are really at this point a free will offering, meant to be done in place of what we can do biblically, because we can't bring the Levites a tithe. We certainly can take care of widows and orphans among us, foreigners among us. There are so many beautiful instructions that Jehovah gives us that we can walk out. But the first thing we need to do is get it out of our heads that these laws don't apply to us. They are the laws that changed the world, These principles changed the hearts and the minds of people for now millennia. They created a people who were dedicating themselves to goodness and justice and mercy, and not honor killings and shame culture and revenge, right? It was different than the nations around them. We need to be different than the nations around us. We need to do what we say we believe. And the first step into that is knowing what the word says. So I'm going to step off my soapbox about how I believe the commandments are for us today and are for Christians to follow. And I'm going to let you go. And thank you for sticking with me. If you have any thoughts or ideas on the commandments, on this idea, this Deuteronomy 13 test, on if the Jesus you grew up hearing about, would he pass that test? And if not, where did the error come in? Where did the misinterpretation come from? If you have thoughts on that, put it in the comments. If you have not already, please follow this channel. Share this if this was edifying. If it wasn't edifying, you could tell me why in the comments. I'm open to any and all feedback. Again, thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing you in next week's portion. I am still a week behind if you're watching this in real time. I'm just impressed I'm not more than a week behind. I plan to catch up this week, although I've said that for several weeks. It's going to really be this week. I got to do it before the feasts come up. We got to get back on track because we have some feast videos to re-record. So that's the plan. Thanks for being here, and I will see you next time.